everyone, I am JENNELYN from Basic English 3B, and today I will be discussing the lesson 5, which is the Introduction to Popular Literature. So, here's our learning objectives. At the end of the lesson, the students should be able to acquaint themselves with the nature, appeal, and social functions of popular literature. Before we proceed, let me introduce to you my co-reporters, Miss Ime, Miss KRIZELLE, and yours truly. Understanding the nature, function, and value of literature. Literature has always been a vital part of human life because it reflects how people think, feel, and live in different times and cultures. It is more than just written or spoken words. It is a creative expression of human imagination and a mirror of society. So, how Dr. Ellis describes literature. Dr. Rod Ellis, known as the father of second language acquisition or ESL, defines literature as the verbal expression of human imagination. Literature is born from the creativity of the human mind. Through words, whether spoken or written, people are able to create stories, poems, plays, and essays that reflect not only reality but also imagination. And next is one of the primary means by which a culture transmits itself. Literature is also a bridge of culture. It preserves traditions, um, values, beliefs, and history and passes them on from one generation to the next. Through literature, we learn about how people lived, what they believe in, and how they saw the world. So let's talk first the nature of literature. So, what is the nature of literature? Literature can be defined as an expression of human feelings, thoughts, and ideas whose medium is language, oral, and written. So, the nature of literature can be understood as the artistic and imaginative use of language to express human feelings, thoughts, and ideas. So, it is not limited to written text but also includes oral traditions such as folktales, legends, and poetry. Literature connects readers and writers by communicating experiences, emotions, and worldviews. Rather, it is not only about human ideas, thoughts, and feelings, but also experiences of the others. It can be a medium for human to communicate what they feel, think, experience to the readers. Literature based on different point of views. First, literature is art. It means it uses creativity and imagination to present human experiences. The next is literature is language. It is expressed through words, whether oral or written, which makes it communicative. The next is literature is aesthetic. So it appeals to human senses and emotions, giving pleasure and meaning beyond ordinary communication. The next is literature. Literature is fictional, so it may create imaginative worlds that present that represent life, even if not always factual. Then next is literature is affective. So it means it influences readers by shaping their thoughts, feelings, and perspectives. Last is literature is everything in print. So it means any writing can be categorized as literature. Literature as an art form. So there are types of literature: the imaginative and non-imaginative literature. Imaginative literature is highly connotative, which means words that used in literary works have feelings and shades of meaning that words tend to evoke. So, imaginative literature or literature of power. So, that the words used go beyond their dictionary meaning, and they carry emotions, feelings, and shades of the meaning that touch the imagination of the readers. So, this type of literature interprets human experience and presents presents truths about life in a creative way. It is often artistic, emotional, and symbolic. So, imagine literature or literature of power includes poems, short stories, novels, and plays. It interprets human experience by presenting actual truths about particular events. So, examples sa poems like Francisco Balagtas kadong sa Florante at Laura, which conveys themes of love, suffering, and heroism. Then example din pod sa novels kay kadong kang Jose Rizal bitaw nga tungno limitang Harry, which reflects the social realities of the Philippines during Spanish colonization. Okay, so for the non-imaginative literature or the literature of knowledge means that the words refer to meaning in dictionary. So non-imaginative literature is more denotative, meaning words are used in their literary or dictionary sense. So its main goal is to present facts, ideas, events, and real life experiences. So unlike imaginative works, its purpose is not artistic but informative. So there are two categories of literature according to Cleden. So Cleden states that literature can be differentiated based on the kind of meanings that exist in a text. So literary text consists of textual meaning and referential meaning. So a literary text contains both textual meaning or how words, phrases, and style interact within the text, and referential meaning its connection to the real world or human or based on human experiences. For example, a poem about love may use symbolic words like kanang textual meaning, but still reflects human emotions and relationships, which is kantong referential meaning. So for the non-literary text only consists of referral meaning. So a non-literary text only has referential meaning. It is direct and factual without the deeper artistic or symbolic layers. So example for this is a news articles reporting on a typhoon only present facts and data without artistic expression. So the textual meaning is the meaning that is produced by the relationship of text itself. So and referential meaning is it is produced by the relationship between internal text and external text or world beyond the text. So um so okay, so let's proceed to the literature differ from ordinary spoken or written language. Okay, so literature uses special words, structures, and characteristics. Primarily, the language of literature differs from ordinary language in three ways. So, first, language is concentrated and meaningful. So, every word is carefully chosen and packed with meaning, unlike kanang sa casual speech bitaw. So, for example, in poetry, a single line like "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" So that conveys deep affection and imagery. The next is its purpose is not simply to explain, argue, or make a point, but rather to give a sense of pleasure in the discovery of new experience. So, literature allows readers to enjoy beauty, reflect on life, and discover new experiences. So, for example, reading a novel like Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, so they provide both enjoyment and insight into human relationships. The last is it demands intense concentration from the readers. It indicates that the what is this? Land literature has originality, quality, creativity, and pleasure. So because um, literary works often use symbolism, imagery, and figurative language, they require careful reading and interpretation. So for example, is the use of allegory in George Orwell's Animal Farm requires readers to connect the story to historical and political events. So, literary from the use of language and the existence. So, from the use of language and existence, of meaning in literary works, it can be concluded that poetry, prose, and drama are put in literary works. Article, journalism, news, bibliography, memoir, and so on can be categorized as non-literary works. So, from the use of language and the existence of meaning, we can say that poetry, prose, and drama belong to literary works because they use creative and imaginative language. So, on the other hand, articles, journalisms, news, bibliographies, and memoirs are non considered as non-literary works because they use direct and factual language to inform or explain. And for the next topic is to be discussed by Miss Amy Bon.
And now let's continue our discussion. But before that, I'll introduce myself first. I am Emibon Calda from BSI English 3B also. Now let's proceed to appeal. Something that makes the viewers or readers attracted and interested in the literary piece. So appeal means the reason why people like to read or watch something. It makes the story or poem enjoyable and worth reading. So without appeal, readers may lose interest. For example, as students, we enjoy stories with humor or drama, right? Because they catch our attention and make us keep reading. Next, we have the social function. In this, we have um, 8 functions. First is entertainment function. So entertainment function is also called as pleasure reading. So this literature gives fun and enjoyment to readers. It helps people relax when they are tired or stressed. For examples that as a student reads comics or Wattpad stories after class to feel happy or less stressed. Next is we have the social and political function. That would be the second one. And this literature shows how society and politics work. It tells us about the life and struggles of people. It helps us understand the world around us. For example, is that students read news articles or poems about social issues to learn more about problems in the community. Third one is the ideological faction. So this literature can shape the way we think. Writers put their beliefs and ideas in their works. Readers may accept or question those ideas. For example, is when students read stories about gender equality, they may learn to value fairness between boys and girls. The fourth one is The moral function. This literature teaches good or bad values. These lessons can guide us in life, and it can help shape a person's character. For example, is a student reading a fable about honesty learns the importance of telling the truth. Next is we have the linguistic function. So this literature preserves the language of a group or country. It shows how people used words in the past, and it keeps the culture's language alive. For example, is this the students reading old Filipino poems learned deep Tagalog words that are not used every day. Next is we have the cultural function. This literature shares traditions, customs, and arts. It let us understand our heritage better. It also helps us to respect other cultures. For example, is the students watching a folk dance drama in school learn about Filipino traditions and way of life. Next is we have the educational function. This literature teaches many things about human life. It shows experiences that we may never live ourselves. Through reading, we gain wisdom. For example, as a student reading a novel about war learns lessons about peace and bravery. Next is the historical function. So this literature records past events and it saves us a time capsule for people today. It helps us to learn about history through stories and text. For example, as a student reading Jose Rizal's novels understands the struggles of Filipinos during Spanish rule. Now, let's move on to the importance of literature. So, it entertains you, or the literature gives you joy in free time, like watching a movie or reading stories. For example, the students read Wattpad or watch K-drama to relax. It makes you wiser also. You learn to judge, sympathize, or criticize characters. For example, as a student learns empathy when reading about a poor child in a story. It improves your language because reading strengthens vocabulary and grammar. For example, the students become better in English by reading novels. It teaches life and cultures because you discover how other people live. For example, reading a Japanese manga teaches students about Japanese culture. It gives information about the world stories, share places we may never visit. For example, a novel set in Paris helps students imagine France. It helps compare experiences. You see similarities and differences with others' lives. For example, is that the students compare their school life to characters in young adult novels. Next is it supports other subjects. Literature connects to geography, history, and science. For example, reading about climate change in a story helps in science class. Next is we have the importance of literary criticism. Criticism helps analyze and understand literature. It makes us focus on important parts of the text and it sharpens our way of reading and thinking. For example, is that a student writing a review of a short story learns to explain why it is good or not. Now let's proceed to universal characteristics of literature. First, we have the timelessness. Literature lasts across time. For example, is the students today still read Shakespeare's works even though they are very old. Second is we have the eternity. Its value continues forever. For example, is the students still find lessons in old myths that are hundreds of years old. Third is we have the universality. It applies to everyone. For example, a student in the Philippines can relate to a love story from another country. Fourth is we have the permanence. Literature remains as a record. For example, KRIZELLE's novels stay important in school curriculum through the years. Next is we have the literary criticisms and its purpose. Criticism is analysis and judgment of literature. It helps us to understand text in different ways. It maintains high standards of literature. For examples, we have the students write reflections on a poem to explain its deeper meaning. Now let's proceed to the functions of literary criticism. It describes and interprets literary works. It increases understanding of literature and it raises appreciation for reading. For example, as a student explains a novel in class so classmates can understand it better. Next is we have how to do literary criticism. First, read the text carefully. Evaluate and brainstorm. Make a thesis and outline. Support with quotes and outside sources. Because a student analyzing like Ibong Adarna writes about the lesson of patience and uses parts of the story to explain it. Now let's proceed to the types of literary criticism. First, we have the archetypal criticism. Second is we have the cultural criticism. Third is we have the feminist criticism. Fourth is we have the psychoanalytic criticism. Fifth is we have the Marxist criticism. Next is we have the new criticism, or also called as formalist. Next is we have the new historicism. Next is we have the post-structuralism. Next is reader response criticism. The next slide is to be discussed by Miss SAUSA for the continuation of the topic. Thank you.
Good day everyone, I am KRIZELLE Joy Pisosa from Basic English 3B, and now I will continue the discussion. So let's move on to archetypal criticism. Archetypal criticism, this critical theory interprets texts by focusing on universal symbols, images, and character types, which are what we call archetypes, that appear repeatedly across cultures and time periods. It's rooted in Carl Jung's concept of the collective unconscious, a shared innate set of memories and ideas. The theory suggests that these archetypes tap into our deep-seated emotions and psychological responses. For our report, you can give examples like the hero's journey, the wise old man, or the quest for paradise. This approach encourages readers to examine how a text's plot and characters align with these universal patterns to understand its deeper meaning. For cultural criticism, it is a broad field that examines how a text is influenced by the influences its culture. It looks at how a society's customs, beliefs, and norms shape the creation and interpretation of literature. This approach is concerned with the relationship between art and the society it belongs to, highlighting how diverse cultural elements affect our understanding of text. We have here the four assumptions of cultural criticism. Ethnicity, religious beliefs, and social class are essential components in interpreting a text. It's not the only way to understand ourselves or our art. Other critical theories are also valid. Examining the relationship between dominant and dominated cultures is crucial for uncovering power dynamics. Also, new understandings emerge when you look at a text from the perspective of marginalized peoples, challenging traditional interpretations. For the feminist criticism, it is a product of the feminist movements of the 1960s and 70s. Feminist criticism focuses on the representation of women in literature. It critiques the patriarchal ideology often present in texts, especially those written by male authors. The goal is to expose how social norms and power structures have historically limited and stereotyped women's roles. You can explain how a feminist critic would analyze a male-authored work to reveal biases in the portrayal of female characters. For the psychoanalytic criticism, based on the theories of Sigmund Freud, id, ego, and superego, this criticism analyzes literature using principles of psychology. It focuses on the mental state of the author or the characters. This approach has two main methods: the psychoanalysis of the author and the psychoanalysis of the character. Let's first have the psychoanalysis of the author. It examines the author's childhood and personal life to understand how unconscious desires and conflicts may have influenced their writing. And for the psychoanalysis of the character, it treats fictional characters as real people to analyze their motivations, dreams, and hidden desires based on Freudian concepts. And now let's move on to Marxist criticism. This approach applies the principles of Karl Marx's political and economic theories to literature. It views literature as a product of its economic and social conditions, focusing on class conflict, materialism, wealth, and work. It examines how the ruling class controls arts and ideologies to maintain power over the lower classes. You can explain how a Marxist critic will analyze a text to see how it portrays social inequality and power structures. For the new criticism, or the formalism or structuralism, it was a dominant formalist movement in the mid-20th century. It emphasizes close reading of a text as a self-contained object, ignoring the author's biography, history, or the reader's response. The goal is to find the singular, stable meaning within the text by analyzing its internal elements like syntax, grammar, and literary devices. For the historicism and post-structuralism, new historicism studies literature within its historical and cultural context, but it recognizes that the critics' current biases affect their interpretation of the past. It sees text and history as mutually influential. Post-structuralism rejects the idea of a text having a single, fixed meaning. It argues that meaning is unstable and produced through language and power. It critiques structuralism and focuses on deconstructing a text to reveal its internal contradictions. For the Marxism, as compared to feminist and new historicism, so this slide clarifies the distinctions between these theories. Compared to feminist criticism, both investigate how literature influences social change, but Marxism focuses on class-based oppression, while feminism focuses on gender-based oppression. Compared to new historicism, both examine literature and history, but Marxism has a specific focus on how history and literature are shaped by economic systems and the struggles of the lower class, whereas new historicism has a broader cultural scope. And now let's move on to the how to do Marxist reading. So this slide provides a practical guide for a Marxist analysis. You would first look for examples of oppression and class struggles. Second, search for covert meaning underneath the surface plot related to class and economic conditions. Third, connect the work to the social class status of the author. Fourth, relate the text to the social conditions of its time period. Fifth, explain how a genre is shaped by its socio-economic context. Sixth, show how literature is ultimately shaped by political, economic, labor, and class conditions. Now let's move on to post-structuralistic critique and reader response criticism. A post-structuralistic critique uses a variety of perspectives to create a multifaceted interpretation of a text, often analyzing how meaning shifts based on the reader's identity. Reader response criticism argues that a text meaning is created through the interaction between the text and the reader. It believes that the text cannot exist without the reader's reaction, as the reader is an active participant who brings meaning to the text. Role of the reader response criticism. This is a summary slide for the reader response theory. The core idea is that the reader is a pivotal part of the reading process, not just a passive consumer. Readers must actively engage with and react to the text, and in doing so, they use various critical approaches, the psychoanalytic, structural, etc., to formulate their understanding. The fine line, they cannot read literature passively but must react, and therefore bring meaning to the text, is the most important takeaway. And that ends my part, and that ends our discussion, which all about the introduction to popular literature. Thank you and good morning once again.